the Sterrant of the Community Wealth Building Commission on 5th of September 2023. Is Councillor Alex Allinson with us? No. I've noted Councillor Brown is present and Councillor Cooper. Obviously, apologies from Councillor Fagan. Councillor Robb, Councillor Ross, and Councillor Walker are present. Cleland Snedden is not with us as yet, or Paul Manning or Suman Sengupta. We have apologies from Hisashi Kubayama and from Jan Gardner. Josephine Previn-Kumar is present, and Stephen Sweeney and Thomas Adamson. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Moving on to item 1, any declarations of interest? No, thank you. Item 2, minutes of the previous meeting. Can we approve these as a correct record? Well, I was at it. I can approve them. Stephen, right? Okay, the minutes are agreed and approved. Moving on now to items for consideration. Item 3 is Community Wealth Building Action Plan 2023 refresh, and I would invite Neil Reid to speak to the report. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. So yes, this is the refresh of our Community Wealth Building Action Plan. So the action plan sits behind the strategy, and it's by delivering the actions in this action plan that we advance the objectives that are contained within the strategy. So the original action plan was agreed in 2021, and since that time we have reported against the actions at Q2 and Q4 each year. And each year, once we've done the Q4 reporting, we have refreshed the action plan. Essentially, we've been taking out the old actions, looking to see that those actions which remain are still relevant and appropriate to what we're trying to do, and adding in any new actions that are required to continue delivering the strategy. So essentially, that's what this document is. At Appendix 1, there is a refreshed action plan, and it's a refresh, it's not a rewrite. So it contains many of the actions that were there before, but they have been tweaked where necessary and renewed for the coming year. So essentially, the report is asking that the Commission approve this refresh, and also that it forms the basis of our performance reporting in the year ahead at Q2 and Q4. Thanks, Chair.
Thank you. Do you have any comments, questions? Councillor Brown?
Actually ask about the timescales on these. I appreciate some of them are reporting timescales rather than action timescales, if you like, but they do seem rather far down the line. And I just wondered if there's any scope for kind of having a degree more urgency on some of them. I mean, for example, on page 13, there's a talk about the ensuring that for our lower value procurement processes, will NHS Lanarkshire will ensure where possible at least half suppliers invited to quote are based in the Lanarkshire area. Things like that. There's a few examples like that through the thing. Surely we're able to do some of that just a bit quicker, bearing in mind the importance of this to development of the actions here.
Thanks, Robert. Neil, do you want?
Yeah, I think it's for the officers and the partners who contribute to this to determine, I think, what the appropriate timescale is. Certainly, and some of them, actions will be happening now. What often happens is that they're written in such a way that the full item will be concluded by the date that is put in the action plan. It's not the point at which, say, things start, or even sometimes key events will occur before that end date, but that's put there as a reasonable point at which we would assume that it would be concluded. But certainly we can look again at the actions and ask people to look at when they could most quickly get some of these completed. Yeah.
Thank you. You okay with that, Robert?
Thanks, Chair.
Councillor Robb?
Thank you. Yeah, I had a wee question. Thanks for the report, Neil. Page 15, it's great to see that we're encouraging companies and people who give grants to pay the living wage. But am I right in thinking that all public people receiving public grants and contracts now are mandated to pay the living wage? Can you say if that's right, and if that can come through the action plan, that we're actually now mandating all businesses and people who get grants and public grants and services to pay the living wage in reality? Thanks.
Do you get Geraldine wants to come in?
Thank you, Chair. Councillor Robb, it is a condition of the grant funding now from Scottish Government, if the council has received the grant from Scottish Government, to pass on that they have to sign up to agree to pay the living wage to receive that grant funding. And then that will have to be evidenced at the end of the year when an audit is carried out. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. I don't see any more questions.
Josephine.
Sorry, Josephine.
Best twice, can you hear me? Okay, it's working. Okay, sorry. Yeah, thank you. No, welcome the action plan, and I think that great to see the work around the anchor institutions and the joint working we're doing around that. The one question similar to what was raised before around the timescales is whether we have something around the measurement of impact. So maybe there is something else you would have that underpins this action plan in terms, for example, I was looking at the modern apprenticeship schemes. So it talks about identifying opportunities, but do we know like whether we want to have, is it half a dozen or 20, or their numbers associated? We have some figures around that. And also this around the procurement one, there is a further paper in the agenda around some work around procurement funding, and I just wondered whether there's any links to what you produced within the action plan to what emerged out of that survey or work. But it's really a very excellent plan and fully supported, but just those are some initial thoughts and comments. Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah, thanks. Within the action plan, some of the actions do mention the metrics that are seeking to be achieved. And so when the report is produced at Q2 or Q4, then that information tends to be included, and also for other actions, as much quantitative data as we can supply is often within the narrative. I think one of the points, though, that emerges from what you're saying is that we could usefully, I think, at a certain point in time, once the strategy has been running for a while, look at some of those metrics and ask how they have moved. And one of the reasons there isn't a scorecard, as it were, sitting there already, is that the group putting this together gave it consideration and thought we really need to let this bed in a little bit and to understand what the baselines are before we start looking at what the targets would be, because I think putting targets in right at the start, we might not have had much of an idea of what those might have looked like. Got a better idea now, so that's a piece of work that certainly we can look to progress so that we can start to put some of those items in the reports. Thanks.
Okay, thanks, Neil. Yeah, that would certainly be useful as it develops over time to look at, assessing some of the impact and have some indicators around some of the actions. Thank you. I don't think there's any other comment. So do we agree to the recommendations in the report? Agreed? Thank you. Item 4, Community Wealth Building Annual Report 2022 to 2023, pages 23 to 46 in your pack. And I would invite Tom Little to speak to the report. Thank you.
Thanks, Chair. As you said, this report brings the annual report for 22-23 before the Commission. And in the report you just heard from Neil, he gave you an update on the action plan, and he noted, and it notes at 4.1 in this report, that the Commission agreed that the actions would be reported on through progress reports to yourselves at Q2 and Q4 each year. So that's a formal reporting programme to yourselves, but the purpose of the annual report is to add to that and to reach a wider audience, spreading the word, if you like, about community wealth building, talking about the aspirations behind it, and making a bit of a song and dance, if we can, about progress being made where appropriate. So we did that for the first time 12 months ago in our first annual report, and that was a shortish, accessible document using plain English and providing case studies to try and bring the policy to life. And now we're here with 12 months on with the second annual report, and that's presented for you in draft Appendix 1. The table at 4.5 summarises the structure and content of the report, and it's the same as last year's, effectively. An introduction, an important but short section on what is community wealth building, because we still are spreading the word and trying to make sure people understand what that is. And then the substantive part of the report is the progress made and those case studies I was talking about. And Neil, in particular, has done a lot of work with partners to gather some good case studies that show a wide range across the 5 pillars, a decent geographical range, and involvement of partners as well as the council in the work. And it concludes with a short piece on where all that sits in terms of what is a 5-year action plan. So the Commission's asked to approve this draft annual report, and if you do, we shall promote it and post it online. Thanks, Chair.
Thank you, Tom. I've got Councillor Ross.
Yes, thanks very much, Chair. I do welcome the report. As Tom said, there's still a job to be done in trying to go over to the public in general just exactly what community wealth building is and just how important it is to everybody's day-to-day life. So I think the inclusion of different scenarios within and the work that we've actually done since we started the community wealth building in its inception is well worthwhile, and I think the report is to be commended. Thanks very much.
Thanks, John. Yes, I found it very easy to read and very illuminating in terms of the case studies, in terms of what we're achieving and what some of the impact has been. And it certainly fits the bill. It's not too long, it's very concise, but also very descriptive. I don't have any other comments. Oh, sorry, Josephine.
Thank you. No, again, the report is very useful, and the case studies are really very interesting ones to note. I was interested in the workforce section, Tom, and one of the things mentioned there is around the recruitment side of things, so more majority being able to complete application. But do we have more information on people, being successful, or is that because it's a fair, I suppose, the way we collect the data, are we able to track also people entering into employment, or is that something we would seek to do so that adds to some of the, action plan and the metrics we talked about? So, thank you.
Thank you very much. I think you've landed on a subset really of what we were talking about before in terms of where we are with the action plan and the ability to deliver more acute metrics going forward. I mean, as you'll know, the council, for example, has extensive workforce monitoring reports, etc. I'm sure partners do as well.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Tom, for the report. Do we agree to the recommendations in the report? Agreed. Thank you. Moving on to item 5, spatial planning and community wealth building. That's pages 47 to 52 in your pack, and could I invite Fraser to speak to the report? Thanks.
Thanks, Chair. This paper that seeks to brief the members of the Commission on the commitment that's been set in national spatial planning policy to community wealth building, and the work that's now underway in South Lanarkshire that will articulate this through our own local development plan. The National Planning Framework was approved by the Scottish Parliament in February this year, and since then its overarching themes and 33 policies have been an integral part of the planning process and the decisions it's taken on all planning applications. In this respect, though, while the National Planning Framework sets a requirement for local authorities that they give recognition to community wealth building, at this point in time, there's no reference to it in our existing development plan. And it also has to be said that the advice that we've got from Scottish Government on this subject is quite light touch. So as such, in preparing the next iteration of the development plan, we will need to develop our own policy framework around this subject and ensure that the local policies that we produce and the decision-making arrangements we have in place link in with and support the priorities of this Commission, as well as that of partner agencies such as NHS Lanarkshire, VASLA and education bodies and a whole host of others. Therefore, this paper today really only seeks to bring the work that is underway through the Planning Service and the Planning Committee to the attention of the Commission, and note that we will work together with members and partners and bring papers back to this forum as appropriate. Demonstrating this link will be an essential part of our plan-making process, but it will also provide a clear direction of travel to ensure that decisions on planning application consider more than just land use implications, but also seek to address matters such as community resilience, local wealth building, and the need to support community-based activities. Thank you.
Thank you, Fraser. Got Councillor Ross.
Obviously, if we're looking at including this in our own iteration going forward, are there any plans that COSLA will be discussing this in general, and also will be discussing just exactly how we formulate this with the Scottish Government as well, so that we've got some joined up thinking going forward? Thanks very much.
Thanks, John.
Yeah, thanks, Councillor. Yeah, I would anticipate this will be a matter that we'll be looking for guidance on coming through from COSLA as well as from the Government as well. We have a number of forums through the planning system as well. We're engaging with the Government so that we know that we have the correct policy frameworks in place. So as an emerging issue, I'd assume there'll be quite a lot of conversations, discussion in this in the months and years ahead. And yeah, COSLA will be they'll be party to that as well.
Thanks, Fraser. Councillor Cooper.
When work starts in the next local plan and when it's projected to conclude?
Yeah, no, thanks, Councillor. Yeah, no, at the August meeting of the Planning Committee, the formal process was agreed by the Planning Committee on that. So actually, this is part of the actual work on the local development plan. Bringing attention to it, it's engaging with all partners that will be involved in it. We'll be looking to go out and meet with a range of community groups, going out to the area committees, engaging as wide and far as we can, meeting with the voices within the community that don't tend to get involved in the decision-making and planning process. So, yeah, the work has started in earnest just now. The first stage of it is around producing an evidence report that we then will need to take to Council. That will be subject to scrutiny by the Scottish Government, and we anticipate that will probably be a year to 18 months. It is an awful lot of work that's required around this, and working within a new policy framework as well. We want to make sure that we are going on along with the line of what the Scottish Government will be expecting from us as a council as well. Beyond that, the then plan is subject to further consultation, further engagement, and it's actually, although it sounds a long way off, it's probably about 4 years by the time we'll get the next iteration of the plan. But there's an awful lot of evidence that we'll have that will then inform our decision-making processes, and a lot of reports that we'll need to bring back to the relevant committees to make sure that our policy framework is up to date and it meets the needs of both the council as well as our partners and more importantly of our communities as well.
Thank you, Fraser. Any more? Could I ask a question? in relation to 4.5 in terms of the key principles. I mean, obviously they are, embedded across our, community planning structure, neighbourhood structure, the current local development plan and community wealth building. But I can see it's certainly, a positive thing that's actually going to be embodied in the new planning legislation. I don't know if this question is answerable, but if in terms of when this legislation is enforced and we get, planning applications that we don't think, or the planning committee doesn't think actually adheres to one, two or all of them, is it the case then that planning permission can be rejected? Because one of the frustrations of the community just now is that they feel that the regulations are really quite rigid, and it's very, few applications that you can actually refuse. And if you think of the current house building that's going on, particularly in growth areas, that they're often not accompanied by, a place plan or an infrastructure plan. At the moment, that is certainly not there in all instances in relation to new build and big developments.
No, that's a perfectly good question to ask, and it's the question that we will be asking of developers as well. They'll need to provide the evidence of how they're meeting the needs, how they are delivering on these priorities. As it stands just now, there hasn't been any planning applications that have been assessed within the terms of the new legislation that's been adopted, because effectively we don't have the guidance that would really allow us to make a strong decision on that. But moving forward, our plan would have to make sure that it includes these objectives, so that the sites that we are bringing forward meet these objectives. We will then ask developers what's not for statements in terms of what they're doing around community wellbeing, and ultimately, yes, if it doesn't meet the requirements, it can be refused. But at this stage, I'd probably say it's early. We hope we don't get to that. We actually hope that the developers will then take this on board, and they will recognise the need and the benefit of investing into communities as well, and local services and local supply chains and the like as well. So I wouldn't like to think it will put us onto a collision course with developers, but hopefully they'll take this on board. And I think having this connection between the planning policy as well as the objectives of the Commission, then we'll all get to a good place around this.
Thanks, Fraser. I've got Councillor Cooper.
Yeah, I was just coming back, Fraser, on that. I wondered how much the 20-minute neighbourhoods within the new local planning framework will contribute to the community wellbeing and sort of wealth building in particular areas.
Yeah, no. This has been the commitment around community wealth building, 20-minute neighbourhoods, local living, promoting development on brownfield sites. These are all part of the 33 policies that are all enshrined within the National Planning Framework. And I actually think they are actually very good intentions, very good objectives behind them. I think they will help to create stronger, more resilient communities, but also help us to guide community development to the right places that will help sustain and grow communities as well. So as part of a suite of policies and overarching themes, I think we'll want to articulate these into our plans around where we want to see development South Lanarkshire, and so that we can maximise the benefits of it. So yeah, it's 20-minute neighbourhoods. All these themes are things that I think we should welcome, and that we just need to put the plans in place to ensure that we deliver on these.
Thanks, Fraser. I've got Josephine, who I've just realised comes up as seat 35, which is why I didn't know that you were wanting to speak.
No, thank you. Again, I think great opportunity, excellent, have the framework to look at some of the health improvement and building that stronger, resilient communities. So just your point about it'll take the full sort of 4 years to have see the next iteration. I was wondering about the evidence report that has been highlighted in section 5.4. What will that entail? Because one of the things is when we look at the pre-pandemic the SIM deprivation or other sort of factors affecting health and well-being of our population, plus on top of that, we've had COVID and then the cost of living. So if you're trying to overlay different factors on our communities, are we then able to look at some of those key things that might emerge, which might not have been evident previously? So I just wonder, how does the evidence report, when will that be available and how will it support our planning? Thank you.
No, thank you. And I think you've just articulated what is the evidence report. It's about looking into how the communities function just now. What are the challenges that they face? Where are the societal issues, economic issues, and the health issues that sit with that as well? And then trying to articulate that into a development plan that will bring investment into areas, will actually encourage active lifestyles, will actually, it moves beyond just bricks and mortar, and that is actually into the growth of communities as well. So the evidence base is what we have to really see is, well, where there is a need to, and that's where we'll guide development towards. And where there is also an evidence base that we can ask for anyone who's building within an area, this is what we think are the priorities for that area and where the investment should go into. So hopefully it guides investment that comes in from the sort of the private sector investment that might come in through, whether it's house building, new economic sort of opportunities, new commercial opportunities. So it's really to try and make sure that the investment that we get into South Lanarkshire actually goes in to meet the priorities that we have here, and the evidence base should guide us towards what those priorities are. That's the theory behind it. The legislation is very early days, the implementation it was early days, but I think it's this about the purpose of this just now, and with meeting with different commissions and groups around this, is to making sure that our agendas link in with everyone else, and we don't just have a land use document. It needs to be a corporate document. So that's the intention behind this. Yes, it is very much a dynamic process. I think the plans that we produce, they need to be in place for a 10-year time, but there's reviews, there's annual reviews that are taking place on it. The things don't just wait 10 years, obviously, and the cycle it just clicks on again. So very much a dynamic process. I think our decision and policy process will need to be dynamic around that as well. So that would be the whole idea behind that.
Thank you, Fraser. Thank you for the report. I don't see any other questions. Do we agree the recommendations in the report? Yep, agreed. Thank you. Moving on to item 6, it's the Town Centre Strategic Update, and it's pages 53 to 58. And could I ask Ian Ross to speak to the report? Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. As the report suggests, this is an update paper. We've brought previous town centre reports to the Commission, and the intention of this report is just to give an update on the key activity happening at the moment. So just to emphasise, this is not all that's happening, but it's just the key areas that we're focusing on just at the moment. So section 3 of the report gives some of the background that the challenges that town centres are facing, sorry, excuse me, which members will be very familiar with, and are common across the country. Section 3.4, we touch on some of the work that we're involved with Fraser and the team around how the work we do supports the local plan process, NPF4, 20-minute neighbourhoods. It's all intertwined in terms of how we work collectively to deliver on that, and the content of this report is maybe giving a little bit of a snapshot of some of the wider stuff that Fraser's been touching on. 3.5 touches on some of the strategies and action plans that have been put in place over the last few years and are on a rolling cycle of refresh. And 3.7 touches on some of these more strategic documents that begin to position how we look at town centres moving forward. 3.8 just is a little bit of a reminder to members at the last meeting of the Commission. There were representatives from the Improvement Service that gave an update on the Shaping Places for Wellbeing programme, which we're running in Rutherglen, and we see that as being a model to take forward as we update and refresh action plans in the future. So moving on to section 4, that touches on 2 or 3 of the key initiatives that we're working on at the moment. The first being East Kilbride Town Centre Master Plan, which, as the report touches on, it's been an intense piece of work over the last 9 months or so, and the master plan is now in a draft format, which will be presented to the East Kilbride members on Thursday of this week. with a public engagement session starting on the 11th of September, running through to the 29th of September. Excuse me. And a report will also be submitted to the Executive Committee on the 13th of September. Unfortunately, with the timing of this meeting, so I can't go into too much detail in terms of what the content of those reports will be, but suffice to say it's ambitious and significant master planning work that will set the direction of East Kilbride for the next 20 plus years. 4.3 touches on the Hamilton Town Centre Master Plan. So again, the people will be familiar with some of the challenges that Hamilton's facing and the recent loss of Marks and Spencer's in the town centre, and will be familiar with the press coverage around other retailers such as Wilko. We're still to get confirmation of the future of that store, but from the press coverage, it seems quite challenging. So section 4.3, as I say, sets out the process that we're embarking on in Hamilton, and the bullet points there show the area of Hamilton which will be the key consideration, which, if you can picture that, is roughly a crescent covering the southeastern quarter of Hamilton Town Centre. That process was approved by the Community Enterprise Committee on the 29th of August, and we have a fairly intense 12-week master planning process underway, with an initial document due to be completed before the end of the calendar year. Section 4.4 touches on the place-based investment programme, so that's funding that all local authorities benefit from, Scottish Government funding, which allows us to work with communities to deliver a range of projects. And again, the Community Enterprise Committee have approved the table at section 4.4.3 for the current year's activity. Section 4.5 again touches on some of the aspects that Fraser was talking around in terms of town centre living, and that's a key aspect of how we regenerate town centres. There's an over provision of retail in many of our town centres, and town centre living is seen as a key aspect of reusing obsolete retail commercial type space. Sorry, I've lost my page there. I think they also, in terms of town centre living, I think the intention would be that a report summarising the work that we're involved with say planning colleagues, housing colleagues, and others across the council could be brought to a future meeting of the Commission. So with that, I'll turn you back to the recommendation at section 2 that the Commission note the content of the paper.
Thanks, Ian. I don't see any questions, comments. Do we agree to the recommendations in the report? Agreed. Thank you. Moving on to item 7, Draft Community Wealth Building Charter, pages 59 to 64 in your pack. And could I invite Neil Reid again to speak to the report? Thank you.
Thanks, Chair. Yes, so this report brings back to the Commission a draft Community Wealth Building Charter following discussions on a charter earlier this year. Section 4 of the report gives a summary, a background in terms of the previous discussion that we had, and it summarises the observations and conclusions that were presented to the Commission based on a review of existing charters in this sort of area. And at 4.6 in this report is really the conclusions that the Commission came to in terms of the sort of community wealth building charter that they said they would like to see, and the bullet points summarise them there. So the Commission indicated that our charter should be easy to understand, shouldn't add layers and add complexity to the community wealth building landscape. It should be used as a vehicle to engage with people and communities and to aid communication. It should include all the pillars of community wealth building and shouldn't focus on any specific one, for example, procurement, which some areas have done. It shouldn't add in additional material other than the recognised community wealth building pillars. And as it were, finally, but very importantly, it should be inclusive and have potential to be accessible and used by many organisations and indeed individuals within South Lanarkshire. So essentially, based on those desiderata, the charter has been drafted by the Progress Group and is attached at Appendix 1 to this report. Section 5 gives a wee bit more information about the charter. So it contains a vision statement, very simple, to work together to create a strong, resilient and inclusive local economy. It goes on to articulate charter pledges for each of the community wealth building pillars, and those pledges, in terms of what they say in the language, that they're drawn from our strategy, though they're slightly reworded to make them shorter and somewhat more approachable. And to illustrate the pledges, the charter then provides examples of actions which could be taken to support those pillars, and many of those actions are ones that we are, as a group of partners, engaged in already to advance the strategy. So in terms of next steps and recommendations, 6.2 in this report contains a number of things we could do now that we have a strategy and if it is approved, now that we have a charter and if it is approved. These include things like launch event that we all attend and promote the charter through, a communications campaign. But I think very critically as well is this idea of the third bullet point there, which is using the charter within community engagement exercises to spread the word about what community wealth building is, and to work with people to talk about how they can contribute to community wealth building, and obviously development of communication materials and web content which explains what the charter is. So with that, let's go back to the recommendations. Firstly, to note the contents of the report, to approve the draft charter which is attached at Appendix 1, and that those activities described, says section 5.4, but it's actually 6.2, that those activities, I'd be interested to know, are they appropriate? Do the Commission have other ideas? And also that we will bring an update report on sometime in the future about how the charter has been utilised and its impact to a future meeting of the Commission. So thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Neil. Any comments, questions to Neil? Could I just say thank you for the report. I think it's very clear in terms of being a charter and in relation to what the objectives are and what we're trying to achieve with community wealth building. In terms of 6.2, I think sort of community councils, certainly Cambuslang would be, community council I think would be very engaged in it and very interested in terms of its development, also neighbourhood groups. So I think there's a wide range of bodies and organisations that we could take it to, and even, perhaps have, kind of speakers, some of the officers maybe going through the community empowerment group maybe, and holding sort of various sessions on it, I think would be really useful, because it's certainly in terms of the charter, and it's very useful to put an example of some of the actions in, because that puts it into context for people as well. It gives a kind of practical example of some of the actions and policies we're trying to take forward through this. So I think from that point of view, the report and the charters, it is very clear and illuminating in terms of what it's all about. Josephine?
Thank you. I think, yeah, I echo the comments made by the chair there, and it's very helpful. And just a couple of reflections, I suppose, is on the charter, young people, children, that, we're talking about the overarching ambitions, and I just wonder whether there's some a possibility of reflecting on that group or cohort of our population in, how we might want to promote that. And then I suppose if just for interest, the merits of similar charters which are out there, and the kind of so what question about how, and then we had a very good discussion in February, because I just wonder whether through the events, do we think that those will be some things we will explore in terms of that engagement, or if we, would there be possibility of amending it further, or you think this is what will be something that will go out and we'll be thinking about the logos or whatever would go alongside that. The final bit is also comment around the sustainability element. We've talked about inclusive economy, whether there is something around that sustainability piece as well. So it's just reflections, but really helpful paper. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. I think all your points are very well made, and maybe it points to the charter being a kind of live document, at least for its initial period. So we might say, yes, we approve this charter, but it isn't necessarily set in stone. And as we take it out to engage with communities, with groups like young people, children, if we can, we take on board what we find from those engagement activities, and then we have another iteration of the charter which has evolved as a result of those conversations, and in fact shows the influence of the views of the people that we've been speaking to, rather than perhaps being, this document has been created by a group of partners, but it is a group of professionals, if you like, and it would be really good to perhaps get some of that live engagement reflected in it. So, some places have put things on websites enabling, communities and people to write their comments and contribute in that way. So we could perhaps look at different mechanisms. But I think if we looked at it as a document which is subject to change, and maybe it gets reviewed in a year's time or 18 months' time, that might be something we could consider.
Okay, thanks, Neil. I don't have any other comments. Do we agree then to note the contents of the report, to approve the charter, and to agree to the activities in 6.2? Yep, agreed. Okay, thank you, and thanks, Neil, for the report. Next item is item 8, third sector and community wealth building, and could I invite Stephen Sweeney to speak? It's pages 65 to 70 in your pack. Thank you.
Good afternoon. Is that sound-wise okay for those online? It's a beautiful September sunshine day, but I'm sure none of us would rather be anywhere else other than speaking about community wealth building in South Lanarkshire in this very moment. And I'm genuinely really excited and grateful to have the opportunity to share with you today some third sector perspectives on community wealth building and some of the points weave nicely with some of the other papers and points that have already been shared today. I'm Stephen Sweeney. I'm the Chief Executive of VASLAN, which is a third sector interface in South Lanarkshire. And actually, I thought it would actually just be helpful briefly actually just to cover who are they and what do we actually do, because I don't want to make any assumption that we're fully up to speed with what the local third sector interface does. So we'll come back to the recommendations at the end, but in the background there, it really just touches on the organisation's vision and mission and our values and what we're actually here to do. We've got 4 main functions, and that's around about building capacity of the third sector locally, so volunteers, community organisations, social enterprises. We really try our best to facilitate the range of third sector voices out there, so I'm never going to be able to come to you and say this is exactly what the third sector's saying, because you will never get one answer. our role is to provide a range of the different responses and views that the third sector may have on any particular topic, which can sometimes be tricky to work with, but that's the nature and beauty of our communities, which the third sector is a line of sight for. We try and connect partners as best we can, and we try and be a source of knowledge for what's going on within the third sector and for the third sector. So, for example, any public sector partners around the table, we've got a huge amount of information about what's going on within our communities, and that's open and available for you to use as you see fit. So some of the things that we've, as an organisation, been focusing on, and I'm sure I'll skip to the point shortly, is we're really trying to reprioritise volunteering, which you see as part of the Community Wealth Building Charter. We really try and be proactive with those capacity building supports, because I'll come on to the local context in a second, but there's no lack of challenges just now, regardless of what sector you're operating in. Probably my enthusiasm at the time getting away, speaking about the third sector, is going to grow, but we're in sustainability survival mode at the minute, and we're trying to support organisations to do just that. There's some invisible stuff in our communities that is just incredible, and we're really trying to make some of that more visible, so we're aware of all the great work that's going on within our neighbourhood and communities and what some of our citizens are achieving. And we're really trying to, particularly post-COVID, really thinking about partnership and collaboration and trying to get people who maybe already be living in the same postcode or neighbourhood but have just lost touch of who's doing what, try to reconnect and work together, because there's only so many resources to get around. Within that, we've also got a strategic engagement role, hence why you're listening to me drone on this afternoon. Very grateful to, in particular, like Sir Tom and Neil, who have been a great support in terms of our Vaslan's engagement with, community wealth building, in particular kind of running the Progress group, and very conscious that Tom and Neil have been really keen that this isn't just a local authority-driven agenda. We've been trying to welcome other partners in. I think it's fair to say we've got a fair bit of work to do in that space. Great that Josephine's here, obviously I'm here, but I think in particular around about further education, which is a real strength in Lanarkshire, and they're not here. How do we think about bringing wider partners into this discussion, because there's huge opportunity when we're all around the table, but respecting of people's time and competing priorities. When Neil McEnroy presented to the Commission, I think we must have been away a year or so ago now, so I'm slow off the mark, but we spoke about the economic footprint of the third sector as a really interesting place to start. So I thought I would, back to one of our functions around a source of intelligence for the sector, I thought it'd be helpful to bring some stats and data and economic information round about the contribution of the third sector within South Lanarkshire. So that little table there just gives you a breakdown by locality and total, kind of annual revenues, which we've taken from organisations' annual accounts, estimated number of employees and volunteers, then looking at that, extrapolating that across volunteering hours, which we've intelligence of, and a volunteer value based on the living wage. And you start to look at all of that, and if you think of Vaslan members as one organisation, that starts to become a significant employer, an economic operator within the area. So I would encourage you to sometimes, whilst the third sector is diverse and broad and vibrant, sometimes if you want to engage with our sector, if you package all of that, that becomes a significant employer in the area. And there's a real risk there of what if some of that gradually starts to disappear? What impact does that have on your respective bodies and your communities? The current context, it's well documented, the ongoing challenges within the public sector, and I have huge empathy for the challenges the likes of local authorities and health boards are having to make just now. You're presented with impossible choices every day, but I think it's important for you to be visible as well of the challenges within the third sector, because from a skill point of view, if anything, these are harder, because sometimes we drip down economics, you're getting what's left. And there's less going round at the moment. We've had a pandemic, a cost crisis, many other ongoing challenges. But I would make the case that whilst I accept the third sector isn't communities, volunteers, community organisations, social enterprises are your line of sight. They're the reality of what's actually going on the ground. And there would be a plea for you to use that more in your thinking. But I think just to frame some of the challenges, you look at the kind of current context. According to Oscar's Sector Review Report, as of July this year, 77% of organisations have got an income profile of 100k or less. So we're speaking about small organisations here, that are maybe reliant on a really small kind of group of people, but doing a huge amount within their own wee patch of the world. Based on SCVO's third sector tracker, 67% of organisations have been challenges with recruiting and retaining volunteers. And the scary one is that at that point, only 89% of organisations were confident they were going to be there in 12 months. Guaranteed that's lower at the minute. Later on in the paper, I know that, that's actually the next point. So at the time of writing this paper, there's 20 organisations since the start of the financial year in South Lanarkshire that no longer exist. That's now close to 40. Services and organisations are disappearing within our communities at a rapid rate, and it's really, really concerning. Many grant makers have now got less funding available. Everybody's taking a pause and reviewing their strategic impact, which means there's less resources for organisations. And there's a real lack of capacity locally, particularly around about community transport, which is an age-old challenge, befriending, counselling, mental health supports, broader social prescribing activities. So there's no lack of challenges out there, which brings us kind of closer to the point around third sector and relationship with community wealth building. And of course, I think there should always be that constructive challenge as healthy partners that work together at a local level. What more can others do? How can we collectively work in partnership to benefit our communities? But there's no doubt it's a whole systems issue. It's a local and a national issue, and there's no lack of challenges about, and there's questions over who's accountable and making sure the third sector survive this very difficult period. But certainly at a local level, social enterprise and community wealth building is kind of being pointed as the route for, if we're wanting some constructive dialogue, if we're wanting to make some progress, if we're wanting to identify agendas where we could make some progress together, then that's an area. So I think it'd be sensible for us to put a wee bit of our energy into that and work collaboratively with you. And I'd make that point round about the economic footprint, and if that was removed, what challenges would that face? I spoke about partnership and collaboration and about the third sector. So we've got locality networks in each area, which I would love to see where public sector partners and anybody's interested in community wealth building engage with a little bit further. We do have local authority and NHS colleagues who attend these and connect directly with community partners. Vasland don't run these. We've empowered local organisations and we support from behind. So in Clydesdale, we've got CCI and Healthy Valleys doing a brilliant job, pulling organisations together, thinking about sharing resources across towns, very much looking at local issues. With isolation and loneliness been a real concern. And East Kilbride, the connected East Kilbride partnerships, the hospice, Healthy and Active and the Citizens Advice Bureau, they've went down the line of very much about good conversations, NDTI, what matters to you, and there's a really interesting connected Calderwood pilot going on. So looking at an actual neighbourhood and the assets within that neighbourhood and how can we generate local community wealth around about based on what's actually out there. In Camglen, a lot of capacity building and direct kind of managed fund support, similar to Hamilton, and a lot of volunteering support, where probably a year or so ago we had 4 organisations working through a volunteer quality standard, but we've now got 46, which is a nice example of the kind of volunteer infrastructure support that's going to help hopefully play a part in helping to build community wealth. Off the back of the draft community wealth building charter, it makes sense that this is just a start. It's a really helpful communications tool. So we need to build engagement. I think if I was to sum up, because I said, we facilitate a range of different voices, if I was to sum up what the third sector are saying about community wealth building, you would get answers along the lines of, there's lots of wealth building, but where's the community? Or I'm really interested, but I don't know how to get involved. These are the types of things that I'm hearing, and I guess as the honest broker working with yourselves, you're looking to try and come up with tangible solutions. So we did some sessions with our colleagues at NHS Lanarkshire around about community wealth building and how do we look at the development of their new strategy and make sure that third sector voices are heard. So it'll be great to, once the draft of the strategy comes out, to see where we're at. And before we knew the local governance review was here, I guess there was conversation around that charter. Can we take it out in a roadshow? Can we look locality by locality? Can we look pillar by pillar, and we can have meaningful conversations around, basically shared understanding of the community and community wealth building and how people can actually get involved. But we've got these local governance review conversations coming up soon, which is great, and we can make sure that community wealth building is really prominent in that and keen to play a part in that. Promise I'm coming towards the end, but I'm very conscious that quite often I come to these sessions do a wee bit of listening. So while I've got the floor, I thought I would just try and make sure that everybody's well informed of what's going on within the third sector at the moment. So social enterprise in particular, there's a new strategy that's been launched. I think you heard about that at the last commission. And while that's been going through various committees and whatever else, we've not been standing still. Colleagues within the local authority in Vasland in particular, there's been a fair bit of momentum built up, so I'm just going to run through some of these things because I think it's important to hear, because this is a kind of area where we can make some progress together. So there's a multi-agency steering group looking at the social economy locally. We've now got a network of There's about 20 to 30 of the local social enterprises out around about the 200 coming together, speaking about issues locally. We've paid for a local census, and now we're kind of drilling down on what does that mean. So we've found real interesting, found that there's a real lack of enterprise activity in rural areas sometimes. There's a lack of ethnic minority leaders. There's a real gap between the desire of public bodies to asset transfer buildings, etc., but the maybe that isn't always combined with the leadership on the ground to maybe take on an asset. So you get that whole asset v liability piece, and how can we join that all up? And marketing and awareness that they're there. Something else as well. We're doing a lot of awareness raising around about democratic finance. There's a small grants funding pot available to social enterprises at the moment. From an environmental point of view, there's a climate confidence South Lanarkshire programme where 15 organisations have gone through it. There's been a social enterprise accelerator run by Inspiring. There's been 15 social enterprise leaders went through that. There'll be another 30 before the end of the financial year. Later in the month, we're going to be launching an app with an online directory of third sector and including social enterprise services and what they're up to, so they can be, located by partners looking to find out what's going on in their own wee patch of the world. We've got a dedicated resource for the network, and the social enterprise strategy was named as a finalist at Social Enterprise Scotland Awards. So that's all kind of been progressed since April, May this year. So there's a fair bit of activity being generated. I won't go through it, but it just shares what the network's actually up to, what they've said their priorities actually are. And I guess to kind of bring to a close, there's been a lot of conversation around about what social enterprises locally, what goods and services they offer, and what statutory services are maybe interested in purchasing. And there's a need for us to maybe stimulate the market locally by getting a bit of transparency around, right, well, what is it actually is available? What in terms of local authorities, NHS, Lanarkshire, further education, etc., what are they selling that's actually realistic that a social enterprise could bend and flex their model and go into another product or service market? So I guess the recommendations of my whistle-stop tour of the third sector and community wealth building is that we use the local governance review really as an opportunity to get the charter on tour, if you like, and start to have meaningful conversations with people within our communities. But it's really just the start. I think that's something we need to collectively continue on, and happy to play in as heavily as required. And then keen for partners to be willing for us to look at this additional piece of research to actually look at what are public sector partners actually selling, and have conversations around what's actually realistic where a social enterprise locally could provide that good or service, and then how do we stimulate that market. So of course there's still a competitive process, but there's actually local options coming forward right now in areas where we're maybe not seeing it. So thanks very much for listening. Happy to take any questions.
Thank you, Stephen. That was a really interesting, comprehensive report, and very useful to highlight some of the challenges and issues that are being faced by the third sector, which obviously, are mirrored across the piece in terms of, statutory services and across different services and public services across South Lanarkshire. So it was really interesting to have that highlighted, but also on the positive side, the key role that the third sector plays, particularly, across all areas addressing health inequalities, employment, all of the things that, it is embodied within community wealth building, and the crucial role that's played by the voluntary sector in building all of that. I don't see, has anyone got any questions, points for Stephen they want to raise? Josephine.
Can I come? Thank you. Very helpful overview, comprehensive, Stephen. Just a note was around the table you highlighted.
Yep.
Sorry, about the variation you can see in terms of the volunteers and the funding around that. And I was just interested in your point about the changes that are happening in terms of number of services, standing down. So I just wondered, with that variation, is there any link to the variations shown within the table and what you're seeing in terms of the areas or services that are being stood down? And also great to see the Locator app going to be launched again in September. But thank you. So this is very commendable.
spin that round so we're next to each other. Thank you. Today, organisations and services that are ceasing to exist, it hasn't been specific to any particular locality. It's just been as and when, but probably kind of reasonably even spread. So there's no pattern or trend at the moment round about localities. I think in general what we find across any piece of work that we do in any thematic area with any policy issue or whatever else is we get huge engagement in Hamilton and in Clydesdale. Yeah, I would say that's now growing significantly in East Kilbride, probably directly as a result of Connected East Kilbride and the partnership that we have there. And Camglen's always been a real challenge, and I know for other partners it's the same, and there's historical reasons as to why that may be. So particularly you look at the kind of volunteer hours there, etc. I think actually there's a typo in the first box there, but that has been a challenge for us in that area, even just for ourselves as an organisation to have meaningful engagement in that area. So for example, out of the 4 locality networks, you see that's the only area where we don't have partners that are leading, and we're offering, Health and Social Care have kindly funded almost organisations to provide that facilitation and bring organisations together, but we don't have any partners in Camglen that say they've the capacity or willingness to engage in that. So there's very much a lot of chicken and egg activity going on there, but no significant pattern. And I guess that there's the volunteering, it's fortunate that we have the volunteering strategy and some of the activity around about that, and actually speaking at the Community Planning Partnership Board about that tomorrow. But certainly the challenges around about people being time rich enough to volunteer is real challenging. So I guess the whole benefit of the quality standards is trying to support organisations to provide the best possible environment for people to volunteer, and a lot of that's around about flexibility with volunteering and supporting organisations to provide flexible opportunities, or understanding that people get busy lives, and how can you squeeze a wee bit of meaningful volunteering into your busy lives, and organisations flexing and making sure that we don't just have people at the early stages of their careers and people that have retired that are volunteering. That isn't a kind of fair profile to articulate, because there's lots of skills of the working population that could be used in a volunteering space, but no particular trend, and early days, and I'll continue to keep an eye on that and feedback if it's helpful.
Thanks, Stephen. Just in relation to what you're saying about Camglen, I know Healthy and Happy are very active across Cambuslang and Whitlaburn in particular, and I know they had been successful in gaining, was it the Levelling Up Fund, or one of these massive funds that came out, the Community Building Fund or whatever it was. But I think part of getting that was to actually support organisations like, the Whitlaburn Stakeholders Group, and make sure that they were, expanded locally, and trying to get it, like you say, as many people as possible, and also to support other organisations within Vaslan. I don't know if you think that has had an impact or not, but I certainly know that was, part of the role that they were supposed to take forward. And it's just interesting what you're saying in terms of community planning, because I would think that being part of the whole, community planning board in that structure would be crucial to make sure that obviously the third sector is involved across the piece in community planning in relation to economic strategy, or funding, joint work, that there's a key role there within the community planning structure.
Thanks. Yeah, certainly within Camglen, I would need to see the reporting on the specific funding you're speaking about, as opposed to off my head. But Healthy and Happy and many other organisations, fantastic organisations doing amazing work. But again, it just goes back to that context. They've understandably having to focus on maybe some particular priorities right now, and maybe don't have the capacity to take on certain other things, and they've made that choice, and we respect that. So it's just that it just leads into that kind of ongoing trend round about engagement. And with community plan in particular, I guess the social enterprise piece and the volunteering piece are areas where we engage meaningfully. And I guess linked to community welfare in particular, I'm well aware that NHS Lanarkshire, Health and Social Care Partnership, the local authority, you're going to be faced with very, very difficult, challenging decisions to make over the next while, and I have huge empathy for the situation that you're in, and there's no easy solutions. But I think that we need to be mindful that those decisions that are made, what they're going to end up doing of the people who maybe have previously benefited from a particular service, is that they're going to need to have somewhere else to go. And where are they going to go? it's only going to increase demand on services delivered by the third sector, and people are going to be presenting with more and more complex needs. So at a time when we're having to make difficult decisions, if we don't increase community capacity, we're actually going to we're just kicking it down the road. It's just going to get worse and worse. And I guess it's just important for that to be almost part of the risk assessment of making any very, very challenging decision. Is that, as a community planning partnership, we have a responsibility, to these people, and they can't just fall off the edge of a cliff. If one service finishes, we need to think about where are they then going to go with whatever needs they may have. And the likely direct or indirect destination is increasing demand on services and projects delivered by community organisations.
Thanks, Stephen. That's a very timely point. I don't see any other questions or comments. So could we agree to note the contents of Stephen's report? Yep, and thank you for that, Stephen. As I say, very, very timely. With that, I'll move on to item 9, Forward Programme for Future Meetings, pages 71 to 74 of the pack, and invite Tom Little to speak to it.
Thanks, Chair. Yeah, probably the most straightforward report of today. Just brings you the forward programme for the meetings coming up. You'll see December, March and future meetings there. There's a number of things already lined up, and there's one or two I know are coming to add to that. So the point is to bring these to you, but to invite you all to suggest any other topics you might have for inclusion in December or thereafter, where that conversation would be now, or you take it away and come back to us with some ideas. Thank you.
Okay, thanks, Tom. Do people have any suggestions, or would you rather take the report away and put some suggestions in later? Josephine?
I think the anchor, so Public Health Scotland have published the anchor framework, and we're looking at, there's metrics that are going to be published in anchor plans. So sort of maybe linking it with the annual report or some part of the agenda would be good to bring that here as well. So that's just one suggestion. We'll come back to you with any other suggestions from colleagues and thank you.
Great, sounds good, thank you. Okay, I have no other comments. Could I just, I've got no urgent business, so could I just thank people for attendance and also thank the officers for the excellent and informative reports we've discussed today. Thank you, and I hope you're now free to enjoy the sunshine. Thank you.